Hi, Jared Voley here again from CreativeStandUp.com. This is part two of a video blog that I'm doing about originality in stand-up comedy. If you want to watch part one, then you can either find it on YouTube, or you can go over to CreativeStandUp.com and you can find it on my blog over there. And also, I should have a link at the bottom that'll link you over to the entire series, and as well as an article on this subject. But in the last video blog, I talked about the importance of being original. I also talked about why comedians might fear being highly original, and going back to the more original something is, the harder it is to appeal to somebody using it in the short term. And I talked about the long-term benefits of doing that. And in this video blog specifically, I want to talk about how comedians tend to overestimate how creative or how original that they are. And the reason is because as an expert in a field, it doesn't matter whether it's stand-up comedy or some other field, as an expert in any field, you make very fine distinctions between different ideas. So if you're an expert in let's just use stand-up comedy as an example. If you're an expert in stand-up comedy, you've been around the industry, you can make very fine distinctions between two different comedians. And that's what happens whenever you develop expertise in anything. That's what happens. However, audience members are not experts. They're novices as far as stand-up comedy is concerned. They know what they like, but they don't know really how to make really tiny distinctions between two different comedians. So I'm guessing that if you spend a long time around stand-up comedy, you can go to an open mic show and you can watch 20 different comics, and you can find different reasons why those comedians are different from one another. And that's true, they are different from one another, but that doesn't take in the audience perspective, because the audience, as novices, are going to generalize all those ideas, and they're going to say, well, he's a storyteller. And then you'd look at him and go, well, he's not just a storyteller. He tells it from a different perspective. He tells it, he has this persona on stage. It's completely different from that storyteller. And the audience member says, no, all of these people are pretty much the same to me, because I'm generalizing the idea of a storyteller. So they can make these very general distinctions, but as far as as relative to a expert stand-up comedian, they're not going to be able to make those really fine distinctions. So as an expert, we tend to overestimate how original we are, because we, as experts, can see all of these differentiations. We can see, well, I'm different from this comedian because I do material like this. But what really matters is the audience perspective. As far as originality is concerned, you have to look at the audience perspective and say, would an audience member really see me as original? Or are they looking at 20 comedians on the night and they're saying, well, they were all funny, and they're leaving it at that? Because that's something that you're going to want to know as a comedian. If you want to really excel in stand-up comedy, you have to be original. But you don't have to be original. It doesn't matter how original you are to yourself or even to other comedians. I mean, obviously, it's nice to be seen as an original to other comedians, because that's going to open you up for more bookings. But as far as a long-term perspective and growing your fan base is concerned, you really want to make sure that the audience, even with their general knowledge of stand-up comedy, can still see you as someone that is different than everyone else, because different is worth talking about. So I'm going to finish up this video blog by talking about 4 different ways that you can increase your own originality in stand-up comedy. The first way is I already mentioned a little bit, is taking the audience's perspective. You want to look at the audience, you want to look at your own material from the audience perspective and relate it back to the material that other people are doing, or the stage performance that other people are doing. If you didn't have all of this expertise in stand-up comedy, would you still pick yourself out of a lineup of 20 or 50 comics, or even 100 or 1,000? If you could pick yourself out of, imagine a hypothetical where you could watch 1,000 other comedians perform all in a row. If Steve Martin were one of those comedians and you were watching in the 1970s, then it doesn't matter how many comedians you're watching on that night. because what comedian is going to stand out? Well, obviously, maybe Richard Pryor is going to be in there because he was fantastically funny. He was very highly original himself. Andy Kaufman's going to be there because he was so original, and then Steve Martin's going to be in there, and then tons of other comics that are all great comedians. But it doesn't matter how big of a show or how many comedians you would be able to see on that show, because the comedians that you would remember are the comedians that are going to be the most highly original. And you want to look at your material from that audience's perspective of, okay, even if I didn't know much about comedy, I could still pick out Steve Martin from a lineup. I could still pick out Andy Kaufman from a lineup. Those people were amazingly original. And you don't have to be way on that extreme of originality. You can be more like Dimitri Martin, where he was original, but he didn't just completely shatter all of the rules of stand-up comedy. He was just, I would put him more of as a moderately original comedian. Steve Martin, there was a before Steve Martin and there was an after Steve Martin. But with Dimitri Martin, he was highly original. You could still pick him out of a crowd, but at the same time, he wasn't so original that he alienated a lot of comedians out there. But my point here is that you want to take that perspective of, okay, let's imagine I don't know much about stand-up comedy. Can I still pick me out of a crowd, and would I still be worth talking about even if I didn't have all of this stand-up comedy knowledge? The next way is to not use these step-by-step systems of writing. I don't know whether you've taken somebody else's writing course or if you've developed your own system of writing, but both of them are not going to benefit you as far as originality is concerned. If you want to be highly original, you have to give yourself the maximum amount of wiggle room to be original, and you just can't simply do that by using any kind of a step-by-step system. Whether you took that system from someone else, whether you developed your own system, you need to have the ability to be, that ability to be creative comes from that gray area where you get to freely explore stuff, and you can't do that if you're using joke formats or anything like that. The next one, I love this one, is to layer complexity onto your material. And when I say this, I mean that the first time you write any kind of comedy material, it's going to be very general in nature. You're going to get the main idea across that's funny. And what great comedians do is they take that laugh and they say, okay, I'm going to build on top of that laugh. And more novice comedians will say, okay, I got a laugh, fantastic. I should go on and write another joke, and then I'm going to compile all of those jokes together, and then I'm going to have my set. But great comedians really take that laugh and they keep building on it, building on it, and building on it. And they don't just build on it to get more laughter, even though that is one of the main goals. Obviously, you want to get as much laughter out there as possible. But what they do is they layer complexity onto their material. So when you go on stage and you're getting some laughs, that's a great starting point. But at the same time, it's probably going to come out as really, really jokey at first. And especially if you're a brand new comic, if you're a veteran comedian, then you likely already have that voice, that your voice very well defined, so it's not going to be the same. But as a brand new comedian, you want to make sure you're first going to go out and get your general concept in there. But as you get that concept nailed down, you start getting that laughter. You want to start layering these fun layers of complexity onto your material. And I like using the analogy of a movie to illustrate this point. If you watch a movie, it's not just 90 minutes of telling the story, giving the facts of the story. Okay, this girl loves this guy likes this girl, that they break up, and then you wouldn't watch 90 minutes of that. But we will watch 90 minutes of an expert story with lots of layers of complexity. And think about all the trouble movies go through in order to create an entire experience. There's the audio, there's music in the background, there's the videographers, there's the people that are in charge of like the lighting, and all of that is so important to the overall experience of the story. You would never watch any kind of a story that just tells you exactly what to expect, where every single character in that movie tells you exactly what he's thinking all the time. There has to be that complexity that kind of makes you want to lean in and know more. And as a comedian, you want to be able to develop that complexity in your own material, where it's not just you saying the jokes out loud. You want to, build complexity by layering more of your personality into the joke, more contextual experience into the joke. There's tons and tons of ways in order to do that. So that's the third way of really expanding your originality. And the fourth way, is to be original in both your writing and in your performance. And what I mean by that is don't just compartmentalize where you're going to be creative. So you want to be creative in your writing. Yes, that's true. But look at all the comedians out there that are also, they have highly original performance styles. And I think Mitch Hedberg is the perfect example here, because if you look at his material, first off, I love him because he's highly original in his performance, but at the same time, he's a one-liner comedian. And I think if there's any style of comedy that it's difficult to be highly original, it's got to be one-liners, because you have so little wiggle room there. You have to drop jokes one after the other. You have to get straight to the point. There's not a whole lot of room for, hey, here's my personality. But at the same time, comedians like Hedberg and Stephen Wright are able to develop their own original performance style, even though they're using this very constrained style of performing, these one-liners. And I would say, make sure, if you want to be original, be highly original, you look at your performance as well as your writing. So in what ways could you be more original as a performer, not as a writer? Can you change up the style of your performance in any way? And then also look at the writing originality of it. It's not just what subjects am I tackling, but how am I tackling it? Can I tackle this subject from a completely new perspective that people aren't expecting? That's going to be tons of fun. So there are 4 ways that you can increase your own originality. I talk a lot about other creative ideas in the Creativity for Comedians program, but I just wanted to give you 4 quick ideas of how you can go about becoming more original as a comedian, and why you need to have originality as a focus in your career, not just as, well, I want to go out and get laughs, but it would be nice to be original, but that's not really necessary. What I really want from this video for you to get is that originality is one of our main goals as far as our career is concerned for comedians. So again, I'm Jared Voley from CreativeStandup.com. If you want to watch the first part of this video or other videos, then go over to CreativeStandup.com, or you can click on the link if there is one.